Rancid beasts. Every last one of us.
Laurence!
Brador shot up, realizing hastily that he had fallen asleep and curled up onto the floor against the hallway wall. The loud bang of the door slamming open, 3 sets of feet stomping out, and the desperate pleas of Lady Luna had him awoken with alarm. He scrambled to his feet and stumbled after the 3 who flew down the empty corridor, alight with red streaks of the accursed moonlight. Pursuing them, he could scarcely recollect how they had entered the Vicar's office or for how long they had been there. He knew only that he had with great anticipation and worry awaited them. The amount of time spent doing so was unknown, as was the duration of his sleep.
Laurence, please! Carol! What is going on?
Her plea filled Brador with mournful woe, and he desired to give her an answer. But he realized he knew even less than them. Before the 3 had entered into seclusion, they had been exceedingly strange. Most peculiar was that he knew not where German had disappeared to, or even if he had entered with them. He slowed down when realizing there was a black gap in his mind of how he even ended up waiting outside the room, only remembering he accompanied the master to the cathedral for a specific task.
"You'll see, dear,"
Laurence half mumbled, half shouted.
"Tonight is the night."
Luna sprinted up and caught him in his quick pace and shoved him hard against the wall. Brador was shocked and briefly froze where he was, before running to catch up. Luna looked straight into Laurence's eyes, while his attention was drawn elsewhere. Derangedly, his eyes darted everywhere that was not his companion's face.
You won't do it. You must help German. That's all that matters.
Laurence finally reacted to the mention of the Master of Hunters. His eyes stopped and fixed themselves on nothing particular, and his face softened.
"I made him a promise. A promise. One that I must keep."
He replied with a sensitive voice after some hesitation.
What do you mean? Where did he go?
"Don't worry. I can bring him back. I know of the Dreamlands. That is where he is. But the time has come, and there is no return. By the rays of the moon will the blood carry me into his heights, where the promise will be kept, and everything.
In the light of the candles, Brador noticed his mouth was covered with blood that also tainted his white and black garb. Then Laurence looked at him. His face was frightening, and not at all like the man he thought so wise. Only plain madness. There was little else that described it better.
"You will see him too. This is all just a dream. A dream to awaken from."
He shook himself loose from Luna's grip and continued rapidly down the corridor towards the research hall. It was empty in the grand hall, as every gaze was lightly turned towards old Yarnam on this restless night. Laurence walked out into the Lumen garden, where he stopped suddenly and turned towards them. He sighed loudly in satisfaction. I was right all along. I was only blind to the simple truth right in front of me. He stretched out his arms in a welcoming gesture. The holy blood. There will be a reward, and I will repay humanity with a grander existence. I will make this sacrifice to show you that once without fear, evolution is possible. Oh, the sweet, sweet blood. I will no longer be so blind. From under his mantle and by the belt he retrieved a small dagger of unremarkable design. He hunched over and brought it to his hand, shiveringly but carefully carving into the palm. Luna rushed over.
How do you know it's true? Whatever there was, how do you know?
My dear, sweet Luna, had you only seen what I saw. You just have to experience it here and now. The blood, evolution, the beasts.
Luna shook her head and grabbed the hand holding the dagger.
I'm afraid, Laurence. I felt only evil back there. And here you are standing, talking like you spoke with God himself. How can such evil be God?
The great ones are enigma, unpredictable. But you cannot be afeard of what you might perceive as evil.
He released himself from her and backed further out into the decrepit garden. Suddenly Carol, who had been strangely quiet and stiff, came to life and ran towards him.
No, you are wrong, Laurence. Please.
He started to reach his blood-stained hand towards his face, but she lunged at him with all her might and tried to wrestle it away, like he held something terribly harmful within it. First, he appeared confused in the red moonlight, then betrayed, and finally furious.
You assault me? After all that you saw?
He jerked his hand away from her and struck her hard over the face with his open and bloody palm. Although Carol was of slender build, the simple strike must have contained enough might to throw down the sturdiest of men. She flew to the sides and spun around, just managing to break the fall with her arms. Both Braider and Luna hurried over.
I told you! I told you!
He screamed loudly, and it sounded like he carried the wind itself within his voice. But he calmed himself and turned away from them, towards the looming moon.
Awaken,
All of his maddening behavior was like blown away when he calmly and composed lifted his hand once more to his face, burrowing it into the blood of his palm. Afterwards, he reached out with both arms embracingly towards the red moon. It seemed as if responding with its light, visibly shining bright upon him. A faint blue glow surrounded the Vicar. It was not visible in the common sense, but rather present enough for it to feel visible. It conveyed calm and serenity, even to the beholder. His breathing became more noticeable, like a resonant echo that increased in volume, deep and mighty. Along with its rhythm, his form began to change. It began with the growing of his dark hair. He started to shake while still holding his arms outward and surrounded by the prominent breathing rhythm that now appeared more like the very breath of the world. His head snapped violently backwards, and blood erupted from his nose and mouth. A long muscle shot out, and his scalp tore itself open, from which terrible and curving horns emerged. His human form seemed to break itself apart, in tune with the cosmic breathing rhythm. His left arm exploded in blood, and it erupted painfully, followed by a sudden growth of his torso. Then, finally breaking the rhythm-abiding growth, like the body grew impatient, he fell down on his new monstrous form as the rest of him followed into beasthood. Yet the serene blue shone persisted throughout the horrifying display. With the support of his hideous and asymmetrical left arm that was unseemingly larger than the other, he lifted his body up. Standing on two slender and crooked legs, he let out a terrible roaring scream in a broken, high-pitched tone. He turned around to look upon them. His new face was that of a cross between a bird's beak and a wolf's furless muzzle. His eyes were small and almost not visible in his terrible skull. A large black and grey mane of long fur stroked his back, and his abdomen appeared incredibly starved, with the ribcage protruding in the dark grey skin. Giant antlers twirled like swirling tentacles from his head, chaotic and growing in and out of themselves. His stance almost carried a sort of godly pride as he watched them. Carol still lay on the ground with Brador hunched over her, but Luna had stood up during the metamorphosis. Unexpectedly and completely unprompted, did a giant hand fling out and swipe towards her. The long and cruel claws sliced her so her comparative small body flew across the garden. Judging by the amount of blood that splattered over the grass, the headmaster over the school of Mensis had departed this world before she hit the ground. He roared again with more fury and less humanity, and held his smaller arm over his face. Brador dragged Carol up on her feet and started to shove her towards the exit door. Laurence lumbered towards him with a hungry and growling pant, his massive hand plunging into the ground as he approached. Brador, in panic and a hint of remorse, fired a quicksilver round that hit straight in the face. Laurence reeled back and screamed in pain, a strained and screechy scream of deafening volume. As if induced by the scream itself, Brador felt much of himself slipping away, like something was growing inside his mind that pushed away everything that was himself, and he could either choose to fight what was growing or let it pass over him. If he decided to acknowledge the fact that his admitted idol and saint of the town had now become his worst nightmare, he knew he was dead. It was not a lucid decision to choose madness. Rather, a desire for survival forcefully pushed all sensible notions aside and let in a cold and calculating frenzy that surely could leave many scars on his mind, but would keep him alive. He loaded up another round in his pistol expertly and unholstered his mace. Laurence swept with his large arm at him, but Brador leapt aside, cutting with the mace into the sweeping arm on his way. He ran around the large body, which turned quickly at him to deliver an overhead slam with the overgrown arm. Each attack was accompanied by one of those ear-piercing screams. Brador swooped in and started delivering as many strikes at the legs as he could afford. Blood gushed from the wound, but did little to even irritate Laurence. There seemed only to be an endless inferno within him now. As he prepared to slam down straight onto him with both hands, Brador leapt back as the hands crashed down into the garden soil, and Laurence braced himself like a prowling animal. He jumped high in the air and landed with a savage blow where Brador should have been had he not retreated further. Laurence appeared confused and had momentarily lost him, so Brador made use of his trusty mace's power and prepared a powerful bash. With the spilled blood from the beast's wound, it amassed itself on the mace, growing longer and wider. He swung as he jumped, and it impacted in the frail-looking side of his abdomen. Laurence screeched and flinched, and Brador ran up to his face. There he unwillingly stopped, as he thought to see a glimpse of the usual spark that he used to see there. It was quickly dispelled by Laurence thrusting forward his whole body in a massive bite. With a lowered posture, Brador escaped to the side and climbed up on the shoulder while grabbing at the horns. There he proceeded to strike in sweeping swings, utilizing the jagged tips to cut open the head at the temple. Laurence attempted to reach him, but by positioning himself on the large arm's shoulder, both arms did not properly reach him. He started to jump around and throw with his head to shake him off, but Brador held firmly by the horns. Blood gathered in the mace, and each strike enhanced its properties and cut deeper than the last. Soon, the very scalp started to loosen, and Laurence's strength started to dwindle. He kept cutting, not noticing his face was covered in blood and his own tears. Slower and slower, until Laurence barely kept his balance and finally, in a guttural sigh, he collapsed onto the ground among the wilted lumen flowers. Hastening up to the closed door, Harald's frightful anticipation caused him to stop himself before it. Even with the church guard at his back and several other clerics of different ranks behind him, the sickening scream and chaotic tumble made the silence all the more fearsome. Yet he knew that the Vicar conducted vital business in the clock tower and could not delay coming for his aid. With newfound courage, he grabbed at the doorknob, slowly peering outside along with his company to the lumen flower garden. Anticipating things to be calm, perhaps even wishfully thinking nothing to be there at all, the silence had betrayed the impressions into relaxation, and he was stunned at a truly horrifying sight. Carol, sitting uncomfortably upright against the stone railing, with her legs stiffly outstretched, empty eyes and mouth slightly ajar. The broken body of what could only be the departed headmistress of Menzies, laying to the sides a bit away. The humongous carcass of the most foul and wretched scourge fiend he ever imagined. In the process of tearing off its curved and crooked antlers from the head, along with its entire scalp, stood a man who he had only seen in passing. It made a disgusting sloshing sound, paired with a sound of sturdy metal hitting bone as it splintered. Lacking proper means to dislodge the large, curving antlers atop the freakish head, the man had resorted to breaking them loose by hammering them with what looked to be a spiked mace.
You!
Harald called out to him, attempting to sound authoritarian, but must have come across as stuttering and timid. The man did not look his way, nor did the sound of all the people attract his attention. He turned to one of his colleagues, who seemingly shared his terror.
Aid me with Lady Carol, come! And for God's sake, someone see to Lady Luna.
Several of the guards circled around the body, while Harald and another approached Carol, who did nothing to acknowledge their presence.
Lady Carol, are you unhurt?
She continued to stare into the void. Harald looked to his aid, but he was no wiser. He took hold of her hand, and it limply followed along with his guidance. He put his other arm under her shoulder and lifted her up. It was not entirely with resistance. It was more like guiding a child. Aware of her body, but not knowing how to comply with his gesture. But he got her on her feet, and she stood of her own accord.
Carol, would you please tell us what happened here?
Her face was the same, despite her now standing. Realizing there was no information to be gained from her, he turned to the man who had succeeded in removing the horn and the skin of its scalp and upper back. He shakily stumbled down from the body like he was in a hurry.
You there, stop! What is your name, young man?
The man froze and looked irritated at him, blinking several times.
Brador.
Are you a hunter?
I suppose.
Well, what happened here? How did a beast enter the church? And where's the Vicar and Master German? Brader looked at him like he had asked him why the sky is blue. His lower jaw dropped down slightly in dumbfoundment. Then he leered sinisterly.
Right. You lucky bastard,
he commented with much spite. He turned away from Harold and walked over beyond the beast's body and started to look for something, all while carrying the bloody bundle of skin and horns close to his chest, soiling his clothes beyond redemption. Harold walked over, with good distance to the reeking figure. Brader reached down with one hand and prodded at the carcass. Eventually he grabbed hold of something beneath it. He had to grab with both hands in order to drag out the right arm of the creature from beneath its chest, heaving as he did so and causing the whole body to shift. Once he had hold of the hand, he spread it out and pointed into the palm, where the familiar symbol of a beast's claw swirled, as if naturally formed into the flesh.
What is this supposed to mean? Sure you want to know?
Harold gave him a stern look, and Brader pointed at the carcass.
It was him. He did it to himself. Before he, was more recognizable.
His tone had shifted, now with a much more sympathetic voice, and with a longingly mournful look.
Best not to say too much. I have relieved him.
He nodded to himself.
Yes. We all live inside a dream. He woke up.
He retrieved his macabre trophy and proceeded to gently lay the bloody, furry skin patch over his head, creating an improvised hood. It was large enough to fall down like a mantle.
It can't be.
Harold stammered, genuinely horrified and hopeful for another truth. But the somber Brader shook his harrowed, hooded head.
I need to sit down.
The man went over to the railing and slumped down on the ground, looking at the body. Harold was left feeling in a similar state. But looking out over the town that still stood, then at the clerics with him, that changed. Familiar light penetrated the scattering violet clouds. From beyond the previous dreadful horizon, covered in blue and purple clouds, illuminated by a crimson moon, arose the pleasant morning sun, just like it always had. finally departing from the dreadful nightmare that had engulfed old Yarnum, the sensation of relief did not set in as anticipated. Leaving with the citizens was the first thing during the whole night that had gone somewhat swimmingly. Jura ran ahead, keenly listening for lurking terrors and spying for darkened passageways. There had been a lot of running on his part, but well worth it. When Henrik and the other hunters had offered themselves to aid in the scouting, he had stoutly refused. Even if the dream would give them new life, it could never take away the experience of dying, which he intended to spare them from. Along with 5 other hunters, Henrik and Gratia shepherded the civilians after his trail. Every other hunter would soon realize that the hunt was over in old Yarnum. Under the gloomy night had a blanket of silence rested. It was apparent, due to the otherwise incessant dissonance the town had been influenced by. Whatever had become of the town's invaders did not matter, only that they were fewer and seemingly less active. With a dull bluish light that shone from the sky of a red moon, he navigated carefully ahead of the group, like a spectre producing no sound as his quick feet rushed over the cobblestone. Occasionally he looked back towards the roofs of the workshop. With a distance from it, the feeling of regret and guilt grew as he ventured further away. Why had he not stopped him? How could he let this happen? But he would always turn away without having lingered long with his gaze, as the mind escaped back to the task at hand, to leave old Yarnum. Among the ghostly streets, he would run through the passages along the sides, keeping tight with brick exterior. With manic eyes and alerted ears he spied through every corner and side street to assure himself of their vacancy. Sometimes he ran completely off track to fully assure himself before returning. He had thought of whistling at them to approach, but at this point in the night, it felt only like another risk that could jeopardize the final push. So he ran to and fro the group, signaling the safety before immediately running ahead once more to guide and to resume the scanning of the dead town. After a smooth journey, with only a few roaming threats that he managed to circumvent, they had reached the main gate that led into central Yarnum. It was blocked by a gatehouse that was overseen by several figures of the hunting type, though not resembling any of German's hunters. The gate lifted for them, and they could pass with ease. Before them, emerging from the crowd of armed men and women, came a man with long dark hair tied behind his head and dressed like that of a prospector, but in white and black instead of the typical green. What stood out was that he bore shining steel gauntlets and sabatons, almost appearing as a shining modern knight. That, and a large, ornate greatsword slung over his right shoulder.
Greeting, hunters. I am Ludwig. We were recruited by the Healing Church as sentinels over the roads to Old Yarnum.
Aha. Prospectors, then. Jura replied, and Ludwig nodded. Where the man then turned to the frightened and now rescued public.
Hear me, good people. The threat is over. No beasts prowl the streets here. There are brave warriors and clerics here to escort you to the grand cathedral, where the Healing Church will see to all your conceivable needs.
They hurried into the safety of the church's merciful embrace, and the clerics emerged ready to treat and prepare any who appeared in dire need.
How was it down there?
Ludwig asked courteously.
We heard many things, but were told that competent people were handling things. They forbade us from entering and told us to keep the perimeter.
Jura's and every hunter's hesitance to speak, paired with their expression, seemed to tell Ludwig and his party enough, as it were. But as Jura prepared a response, Ludwig became wholly distracted and fixed his concerned glare over his shoulder.
By the holy blood,
he mumbled. Jura turned and shared in his expression, though more surprised than he thought he would be. Pyres of violent flames erupted from the largest buildings. Roofs exploded, towers erupted, and streets lit up in bright orange fire. The burning of Old Yarnum happened faster than anticipated. Suddenly it was all ablaze. The only thing one saw beside the fire was the silhouettes of the large stone buildings and the high clock tower, who presently seemed to be spared from the inferno.
What have they done?
Ludwig was stunned.
This cannot have been sanctioned by the church. There must have been so many more than these here left.
Jura turned to him.
There were, but the church would not see it that way.
They all stood a moment longer, in honor for all that had been lost. To fathom such a number, to try and count every man, woman and child that had lived in Old Yarnum, could cause one to be overcome by frenzied madness. But like the rest, Jura refused his mind to wander away from it, even though he could not picture it correctly. Having been well acquainted with the powder keg workshop, he had frequented the old streets. All the faces he had seen in those days were now gone, forsaken, not by a curse, but by them. It felt deranged to stand in silence, to dedicate a few mere minutes, but no other action, however more struggle put into it, would not right this wrong. The looming and frightful clouds scattered, the red moon faded out of existence, and within a few more minutes the sun started to rise, just like it always had. Beast Embrace. After repeated experiments in controlling the scourge of beasts, the gentle Embrace rune was discovered. When its implementation failed, the Embrace became a forbidden rune, but its knowledge became a foundation of the healing church. Those who swear this oath take on a ghastly form and enjoy accentuated transformation effects, especially while wielding a beast weapon.